presence is all I need, it's all I want.
Somehow we've got to get back to the presence of the Lord as the main attraction, that when we gather. And what that looks like for me is that when I turn our worship team loose on Sunday morning, I'm ready to teach. I know that it's probably going to happen. I want it to happen. But there are times where that glory begins to come in such a way. And I realize that, okay, my 45-minute talk just got cut back to 30. And we continue. And if that glory continues to manifest, there's no way I'm going to interrupt God so that I can talk. I mean, that's embarrassing. Excuse me, God, I have something to say. I'm just not going to do that. And so my advice to people is learn to recognize the presence. Learn in your own private life, learn how to recognize when His presence is so commanding and so demanding that your agenda gets put aside, that thing that you were going to do for the next hour just got tossed out the window because you're alone in your office and the presence has come and that cry of the heart has been satisfied and there's nothing else you'd rather do.
If we've learned anything as worship leaders, it should be that the presence of God in our meetings when we're leading worship is king. That is the main thing. That's the most important thing. You know, when Saul was tormented in the Bible by evil spirits and he called upon a minstrel and David came and played his harp over Saul and he was delivered of those demons. That just doesn't happen with a nice sweet song or a nice melody. When God inhabits the praises of His people, like Psalms 22 verse 3 says, He inhabits the praiser. You know, that's everything to us as believers. If we don't have the presence of God, we might as well go home. I mean, if the presence of God isn't in your church, you might as well go home. People don't want to just come to church to get a donut. You know, they don't want to come to church to get a nice display or a nice song or a nice, 4-point message. People really are coming to church because they want to encounter a supernatural God who loves them and can take care of them and set them free.
Worship is actually our response to God's presence. Like thanksgiving is our response to God's works. Praise is our response to God's nature, and worship is our response to God's actual presence. And so we worship because He's present.
You know, Carol Wimber, she used to say, don't pursue the power. She said, pursue the presence of God. The power is in His presence. And I've just found when a people of God gather together and they pursue the presence of God, they will experience heaven on earth. They will experience His coming. That's what it means when He says He's enthroned upon the praises of His people. His kingdom, His reign, His rulership is established in the midst of a people who will just worship.
The presence for me is just that celebration and that awe of Him and that realization of Him. And in the Bible, they had so many feasts and celebrations, and, it's like they had Thanksgiving every other day. And I love coming to the table of the Lord, coming to worship, just going, what part of you are we going to just freak out about today? Like, what part of you are we going to celebrate? What part of you is, going to happen? What part are we going to see? Like the angels that circle the throne. What part of you are we going to see and just be taken, aback by?
I think feeling the presence of God is my number one goal with worship and my number one, whether leading worship or experiencing worship. And so, I remember a day when I would go in my room and put on the new Enter the Worship Circle CD and just dance around my room and just worship God in private and experiencing His goodness and experiencing His touch. And those were the moments, I think, that made me fall in love with Jesus.
I feel like a heart truly alive in the presence of God can't get away with not worshiping Him. Because once we've experienced a glimpse of His glory in our lives, anything else doesn't satisfy.
Learn how to leave room for that spontaneity in your worship. When we call it a Selah moment, where everything just kind of comes down and you just pause. You're waiting for your next move. A lot of times, we'll get nervous, and when there's that moment where we don't know what to do, we try to cram it with something that we've always done because we're uncomfortable. When God wants to do a new thing in our meetings, and if we'll learn just to be at ease and be at peace and realize, God wants us to succeed more than we even want to succeed. God wants to come so bad in our meetings. All He's waiting for is just our willingness to follow and obey.
Honor the presence of God. Honor that glory. When that glory begins to come, man, don't get nervous and try to think of something to do. Just stay there and honor Him and teach the people how to respond to Him, how to lay their life down, how to come into that place of tenderness. And in the New, I think it's the New Testament, one of the words for worship comes from the word that means kiss, and so it's a real intimacy. It's our response to the presence. That's what worship is.
People from all different walks of life have come into a meeting because they're desperate for God to touch them. And when His presence comes in the room, we've seen people get delivered from drug addiction, they've had lifelong addictions to drugs. People that have marriage problems, have been to counseling, have done everything they can, but just in the presence of God, for whatever reason, they fall in love again. I mean, it's crazy all the stuff that happens when His presence comes. We need to be hungry for His presence. You know, a friend of mine said, if His presence is our destination, why don't we run after it with everything we have? And that's what we need to do, you know, as worship leaders, as leaders in churches. It's like people are coming, they're so desperate for an encounter with this living God, you know, the supernatural God that we talk about all the time, you know, the God that sets people free, the God that brings healing to people. And, you know, a way to steward that is to go after Him when you're leading worship. Go after Him, welcome Him, make room for Him in your meetings.
There's a lot of different things that draw people, but not everybody knows that the realm of the prophetic, the realm of healing, the realm of the inner healing, the counseling, the deliverance, all these things were learned in the manifest presence of the Lord that came in response to worship.
We've seen healings, people get delivered of lifelong addictions, where they've been to counseling for years, and just in that presence, you know, they get set free. I remember one time, years ago, when the renewal was going in our church, when God was pouring out His Spirit and people were getting set free and there's just this freedom going on. I remember it was probably 12 or 1 in the morning, and it was we were doing ministry time, and I was walking around with my acoustic guitar in those days, and we were playing over people that needed to be set free. This one lady was tormented, and she was, you know, in tears. She's laying on the floor. There's lots of people praying for her. She's just so tormented. You know, like in the Bible, when Saul was tormented, he called upon David to come and play, and David came and played, and the spirits left him. And I remember playing over this lady, and there was just this compassion I had for her, because I remember being like her. You know, I went through seasons where I was severely tormented, and we would just worship over her, and she was set free in that moment. And that's why we need the presence of God in our worship. You know, worship isn't just an expression. You know, worship is everything. We have to have His presence.
I think I always had that tendency, you know, to like never like overhype spiritual things, you know? So I'm always like, I'm very John Wimber-ish, like I'm just gonna lay low and not really. I love the presence of God. Is that the kind of energy you want? The presence of God!
Well, first of all, I fasted for 3 weeks, and then I climbed to the top of the highest mountain I could find, and I waited for days. And then this revelation came. No, that's not obviously what happened. But it's not.
And what the heck? Am I going to cry here? What's going on? Let me start over. I want to get through this. Edit. Think about hunting. Okay.
Mess. I'm a mess. Never gonna stop. Can't quit it.
Can you make me look as good as Jen? That's what I want to look as good as Jen. That's all I care about.
I asked them if they had the CoverGirl ebony line for my dark skin tone. You can't be putting that pasty white stuff on me. Ebony line, baby. Queen Latifah, she started the Ebony line for CoverGirl. It's awesome.
My favorite worship song, I think it changes every week. I've been humming that one, I Will Exalt. It's going to be on the new Bethel Live CD. Delete that.
I'm already in your golden chair, so.
I did not swim. I was just like hanging out. Hanging, because that's how you say it. I was hanging out. Hanging. I was hanging out